From the arena to the front office, this is Scoreboard. I'm Chris Titley, and each episode brings you stories from the game of sport, where mindset, money, and meaning shape what comes next. Athletes, coaches, owners, and business leaders unpack the moments that matter, because the Scoreboard isn't just about winning, it's about life beyond the game. Now let's get to this week's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I am joined by Mitch Dyer, the athletics broadcaster to the stars. Mitch, how are you today, mate?
Fantastic, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on, mate. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. We're here on the 17th of April, just before Easter in 2025, and 2025 has shaped up already to be a stellar year for athletics in Australia. Mitch, your thoughts on 2025 thus far for you?
Oh, it's been pretty surreal, I think. As someone who's been in athletics a very long time, from a competitor now to working in it, I can't think of a better year that I've ever been a part of, and we're only 4 months in. So, look, last year was amazing. Anytime you can continue some momentum off the Olympics and our World Juniors and Paralympics and everything like that is never guaranteed. But, look, the athletes have just stepped up to another level. We're welcoming some new young talent. Obviously, Gout sort of not just captured Australia, but he's captured the world. And our, more veteran members of this team now are also pushing to break world records and win global medals and do some incredible stuff. So, mate, we're in a bit of a renaissance of athletics at the moment. So it's fun to be a small part of it and be in and amongst it.
That's a great word to use, the renaissance. The recent Nationals in Perth got a lot of attention. It was on Channel 7 firstly, and people could watch it, and also the juniors. Some of the highlights for you from that event?
Yeah, I think, look, again, we've seen athletes now really come out and start to stamp their authority on some events. Sprinting in this country has just gone to all new levels, and it's not something in my timeline that I've ever really seen dominate. Not really since Shervo and PJ back in the early 2000s, would I say. We've had a depth of sprinting talent, but even down in our juniors, and like I said, Gout is obviously going to draw the headlines. But for mine, the best moment out of the juniors was young Leah O'Brien. Now, she's just 17. She came out and she broke Raylene Boyle's, national record from all the way back in Mexico City. Is now the fourth fastest 100-meter woman we've ever had. She's equal to Sally Pearson. To me, that was surreal to watch, and to be in a privileged position to call her moment home and be a part of that was amazing. But it just stood out to me because I thought, wow, I mean, obviously, yeah, everything sort of lives in the ecosystem of those that are getting attention. But, geez, we've got some athletes who haven't even started to scratch the surface yet, who are really going to be something special come this Olympic cycle now as we roll to LA. And then, that 4 years where you get a home Olympics, it's just amazing what it does for not just athletics, but all these Olympic sports like swimming and everything that sort of gets highlighted during the Olympics. So, mate, she stood out to me. But, look, we had some juniors doing some insane stuff, winning 2, 3, 4, 5 gold medals at the Nationals. So you look at that and you think, geez, when they get into their strong point, when they get into their 20s and mid-20s, it's going to be scary. So we're becoming a powerhouse of athletics nation, mate. We're not too far away from hitting our stride, and it's cool to be a part of.
Mate, and you just touched on them being a part of. Now, you're an athlete yourself. You want to give the listeners a little bit of a glimpse of your athletic life, and then the pivot in terms of like, okay, I enjoy this, and let's get going. I want to get behind the mic.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in athletics. My old man was a race walker in his time, and my uncles run a lot of marathons. My granddad was involved in athletics. He actually built the grandstand out at Knoxville Athletics track. My grandmother was a life member of Corio, the home straight's named after her. So, look, I've sort of come from an athletic family, so naturally stepped into it. I was also built like a string bean, so distance running was inevitable. Look, tried my hand at footy and cricket and stuff, but I was pretty useless. So I stuck to running, and, yeah, mate, I had a great time as a junior. I sort of was fortunate enough to win a couple of national medals and ended up going over to the US and spent 3 years over there in the collegiate system. Now, it didn't really work out for me. I think also when I was 19 years old, with the world at my feet, I don't think I appreciated the opportunity as much as what I should have, but I learned a lot and I got a lot out of it. I did get sent packing. They sent me back home. They said, this kid's not quite working out. We'll send him back to Australia. But I think that was good for me in a lot of ways. So that ended my athletic career. I was just pretty over it by then. I was pretty injured. I was 23. I thought, no, I don't think I'm going to make that next step. Came home, and funnily enough, I actually came home pretty lost. I didn't know what to do. I didn't love uni. I hated studying. It wasn't for me. My tutors and my lecturers could tell you some nightmare stories over in the US. And my old man was a carpenter. So he was like, mate, do you want to get on the tools? And I thought, oh, not really. That sounds pretty hard. And then I did some labouring, and I thought, yeah, I'll give this a go. So then I was a carpenter for 4 years. I did my apprenticeship.
There you go. Little known fact.
Yeah, there you go. So if you need a house built, just hit me up. I can do jack of all trades. Did that. But look, I've always been a talker. I've always wanted to be in media, and I just started to do things volunteer. I started to volunteer at the VAFA, so local footy. I was doing some work for Athletics Exclusive, which let me broadcast, and Athletics Victoria, and then Athletics Australia. And it's sort of just been a build-up really over the past 3 to 4 years. So, yeah, I did that. And then I'll try and make a long story short. I ended up quitting my job as a carpenter. Went overseas, just tried my hand there, managed to land a job at News Corp. Flew home from going overseas. I was going to go on one of those.
You didn't get sent home this time, though, did you?
No, I didn't get sent home. I came home on my own accord, which was a good feeling. I'm sitting in the US airport, and I thought, wow, this is nice. I've come home because I want to come home, not because they're telling me to get the hell out. So that was nice. And then, mate, moved to Mackay, spent 10 months in Mackay covering sport up there for News Corp. And we're still broadcasting, and I got to be a part of the World Cross Country Championships when they were in New South Wales, which was massive, which was my first time really working with the likes of Bruce and Jess Trengrove and all these really talented athletes and broadcasters. And then quit my job at News Corp. This sounds like a common theme, but quit my job at News Corp because I thought there was a gap in the market for athletics, and then went to Europe for 3.5 months, backpacked my way around, slept through airports, did what I had to do to sort of get the Instagram page up and running. And yeah, mate, just been really focused on that ever since. So that's been 2 years now. And this year, to your point, in 2025 has really been my first year jumping on 7+ and being a consistent staple in terms of the broadcasting of athletics in this country. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. I would say I've probably done a few things the hard way, but I wouldn't change it either. I've never appreciated it more than now. So here I am now broadcasting and doing that stuff and heading back overseas to, follow them around the European summer. And yeah, it's a pretty special place to be in. So I'm very grateful.
Mate, that's brilliant. The stats and the numbers, are you a numbers person? Are you a stats nerd?
You know what? I've never been a stats guy. I've always, God, this sounds so bad. I've always been a vibe guy. So I'll assess people on the vibe. And I love watching racing and I love breaking down races and watching what people do. And I would actually say I take a bit more of an anthropological view on it. I just love observing. And so my big learning this year, and from working with Bruce and Dave Colbert and Tamsin Manu and all these, great broadcasters in terms of athletics, is they're so stats driven. And I remember sitting down with Bruce, I think the second time we'd worked together, and I was just asking him about sprinting, just one of those innocuous questions. Oh, have you ever seen deeper sprinting in this country? And he tracked back to Edward Flack, 1896 type Olympics, and walked me through every Australian that had medalled at the Olympics in sprinting from then on. And I just thought, oh my God, I need to step up. I was like, I need to start learning these stats. So recently I've become more stats driven, remembering times and remembering what people ran from years ago and past Olympics and all that. But it's pretty fresh to me. So I'm taking a good learning from Bruce and the gang. And hopefully next year I'll be the stats man. So we'll see. That's
unreal with Bruce. I'm going to touch on Bruce just for a second. I mean, this podcast is about you, of course, but working with Bruce and then, watching him commentate AFL and then watching him commentate, Kathy Freeman and athletics per se, and then going back to sort of like the Sydney Olympics where, one of his great calls was the 1,500 metre from the greatest never to the greatest of all time. Knew the intricacies of the 1,500 metre runners. I mean, the brain must be unbelievable. But then also not just having the photographic memory or the brain, etc., but then to actually extrapolate that into what people are watching. the art of commentary. How are you going with Bruce and keeping up and kind of using him as a bit of a mentor, I suppose?
Oh, yeah. No, it's a great summary. I mean, I think everything you just said is the perfect way to summarize Bruce. It was it really is a dream come true. Honestly, the way that I describe it is that you could not get a better apprenticeship in terms of who to learn from and who to watch. The first time we worked together this year, I was just, and I'm a talker, I was like dead silent. I knew that I had to come into the room and just observe how he went about things. And the most underrated part of Bruce for me is how he treats people. He'll shake every sound technician's hand. He'll remember their names. He remembers their wife's names, their husband's names, kids' names. He'll ask questions. If he has a stat that he can't slide into a call, he'll give it to you so that it helps your calling. He's just so inclusive of everybody sounding good and everybody feeling good. And to me, I was like, that is the exact type of person that I want to be. And I think it holds him in such good stead. So when you add that on top of the way that, to your point, he extrapolates information and explains it to people, it's just like poetry. And it sounds like I'm like glazing on Bruce here, but it's just like, as a caller, and you try and think, I got advice when I was young, they're probably only going to take a snippet of longer races. So you need to make sure that when your moment comes, you make it last. You make it sound like that you know what you're talking about, and you give that athlete their moment. It just comes to him, mate. It's just, like, I'll sit there for a while and be like, all right, what's going to sound good? He just has it on lock. So to watch his brain work and listen to him command a room and call is just phenomenal. So I think over time, over the last few months, I've got more and more confident in, engaging with Bruce a bit more and asking more questions and doing all that. But I knew coming in, I was like, all right, Mitchell, just shut up. Don't say a lot. This isn't your moment, and that's okay. Like, leave your ego at the door. This isn't about you. It's about listening and taking this in, because, you never know how long someone's going to keep calling for. And Bruce is so tactile. Like, he's still just so together. I hope he's calling for another, 10, 15, 20 years. Now, I know that that's probably an overkill, but it's just surreal. Like, anytime I'm in the booth with him, to have his number, to be able to sort of lean on him in ways and ask him questions, I don't take it for granted. So everything you see on TV, and I remember the video, I don't know if you remember this, of him calling winks.
The race
while he was
horse,
at the desk for 7, and he's like slapping the desk, and that's exactly what
the horse racing. We forgot the horse racing as well amongst the AFL and the track and field and the 1500 metres and every Olympic event. Yeah.
Mate, track and field and horse racing, I think are his 1-2. And then he loves footy, but track and field, for whatever, and I've never asked him this, and I always want to ask him, like, why athletics? He's been calling the Olympics, I think, since 82 or 86, but they're just his favourites, and just the enthusiasm, even calling Gout, even calling like Ollie Hall, Rowan Browning winning on the weekend, the triple dead heat from the women. Like, it's impossible not to get sucked into his enthusiasm. And I think he's taught me that it's okay to be really enthusiastic. I've kind of had advice going through where they're like, you need to temper it down and you need to be a bit more reserved. And then when I talk to Bruce, he's like, don't do that. He's like, just be yourself.
The triple dead heat call was amazing, because it was literally, you're watching it and he called it at the moment of basically all going on, and you're going, I think that's a triple dead heat. And then Bruce goes, and so it's like the listener or the watcher goes, that's just the perfect call, right? Because it's straight into my brain.
Mate, 100%. It's like validating, isn't it? Because you're like, is that a triple dead heat? And then you hear him say it, you're like, oh, I'm the smartest bloke in the room. You're like, yeah, it is a triple dead heat.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's just encouraged me to be myself and, be excitable and be engaging, because that's what people want to connect with. They want to feel excited about whatever it is you're calling. So, yeah, it's been surreal. He's been such a big help for me in a short period of time.
And Mitch, you talked about moments, the snippets, the piece of commentary that they'll take in the news, and then about 4 weeks ago, your moment came, right? Get out of this world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, out of this world.
And so, you can type it in Google. It's still there. There's YouTube. There's Instagram clips with it all, etc. How did that moment come about for you?
Yeah, great question. So it was I'd been asked to commentate that meet, and originally I was like, I'm not 100% sure. And then I asked a good friend of mine, Tom Thorpe, who does all this stuff for Australian Athletics, I said, "Oh, is Gout running?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Mate, I'll be there." He said, "I don't care where it is, I'll be there." Because I know his manager, and he said, "Look, mate, he's really fit." And I thought, okay, there's a real opportunity here to be able to call this home. And I then sort of went into thinking, and I made the silly mistake of asking my mates. I was like, "Oh, what should I say?" And then everybody had an opinion on what the call should be. But I just thought, Gout of this world, it kind of rolled off the tongue. I was actually really nervous to say it because you get in your head a bit. You're like, "Oh, what if it's cringy? And what if I mess up the timing? And what if it's not quite right?" But once I'm in the race, I'm not thinking about anything else. All I'm thinking about is breaking down what's happening in front of me. So, yeah, mate, he's humming out of the blocks. You're like, geez, this will be quick here. And he obviously pops off out of the bend. He does that all the time. His final 50 is incredible. So I was like, oh, I'll commit to it. I'll stay out of this world. And then I hadn't checked my phone. So when I'm in the booth, I check my phone a bit. But for whatever reason this day, I was like, oh, I just won't check it. And then, yeah, I checked it after. And it's Fox Sports' headline is Gout of this world, the Herald Sun. Everyone's taken it. And I thought, okay, I might be onto something here. So I've got to keep Gout of this world. And then this weekend, because I knew he'd go quick, I was like, I'll send him to the universe. So I think I used Gout of this universe
you did.
this weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, so maybe he goes to the stratosphere. Yeah.
And mate, you had to pick your moment, of course.
Yes, exactly. So I was like, oh, geez, we're going to have to wait here
somewhere.
Because, yeah, I was like, I got to try and slide it in. And I don't tend to do that anywhere else. I'll just let the call happen, and whatever I see. But, yeah, I kind of had a suspicion, all right, if he runs quick here, this is a really cool opportunity to sort of get my voice out there. And, as much as it is cool that I got my voice out there, it all hinges on how phenomenal the athlete is. So I actually saw him after the race, and we shook hands and dapped up, and he was like, "Mate, thanks for the call." I was like, "Mate, thanks for running quick." I was like, without you running quick, no one would have listened to it. So it's all
still got a bit
you,
left
mate.
in the tank, a little bit faster. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. He's just a super talent. But, yeah, mate, it was grouse. Like, I'll probably go back to Gout of this world. I think it hit better than the universe, but always good to test and see what people like.
And the key to commentating a quick race, what are you looking at?
Yeah, well, I've sort of probably honed it in over time, but I've realized you've only got, in the 100 for men, you've got 10 seconds. In the 100 and the 200 for women, you've got 23. I'm sort of in my head, I'm like, right, this is the timeline I've got. I'll essentially outline who the fastest in the field are. I'll sort of primarily focus on them off the jump. I'll go back, and because I've watched a lot of athletics already, I don't have to go back too far, but I'll know how they run and what their start is like, what their drive phase is like, what their end phase is like. And I'll dissect that. And then I know with 50 meters to go in the 200, I've got a few seconds to slide in anything I really want to say. And with about 40 meters in the 100, I've got 3 seconds to think of something. So I'll try and get out just about everything I want to say in the opening stages so that I have a buffer at the end to call what's happening or pick a moment and sort of do it like that. So, yeah, look, I don't think a lot. And I think all my mates and my family and my girlfriend will tell you the same thing. They're like, mate, you don't think about anything. So it comes to a luxury when I'm calling because I'm not in my head. I'm not thinking a million different things. I'm just sort of seeing what's happening. So, look, in general life and the fact I don't have a calendar is bad that I don't think. But in terms of race calling, it's a blessing because I'm just focused on what's happening.
And for the listeners out there, I tried you about 50 times, mate, in the last week or so, trying to get you. Yeah. I sent you calendar invites. Yeah. You rejected me. There was nothing. I was like, what is this guy? Who is this guy? And I finally got you, so I'm honoured, right?
He's an enigma. Yeah, he's an enigma.
Going back and listening to yourself, have you gone back to listen to your early calls and what do you think of them?
Yeah, I have a few times. They're pretty bad. Like they're very bad, I would say. And that might be a bit harsh. Like I think I don't know. That's actually a really good question because I do look back sometimes and I think, oh, actually, I really like the way I called this because it's very free and I'm not thinking. And I think sometimes when you're starting to develop and maybe you're getting a little bit more attention, you start to retreat in yourself a little bit and think, oh, I need to be a bit more professional or I need to be a bit more that, which to a degree you do. But to me, sometimes I'm like, I remember when I started doing this, which is only like 4 years ago, so I'm still so fresh, but I was just having a really good time And I think that that's really important to my calls. So sometimes I listen to it and I'm butchering names and like I've missed a moment, or I'll watch the race back and I'll just think, oh, Jesus, Mitchell, like you missed that. Like, why couldn't you say that? But yeah, I would say I've become far more refined in the way that I call. I think a lot more succinct and can pick apart races better. I reckon at the start I was trying too hard to think of like funny moments or something that I could say that would stand out. And
that catchy moment that you talked about early, maybe like that moment where you're like, oh well, I'm going to be on the news for one call. I better think of something quirky, right?
Yeah, and I think I just tried too many of them, and then you're actually not paying attention to what's happening in front of you, and you're missing key moments. So I think I've learned timing, and I've learned things a lot deeper, and I've still got so much to learn. Like I still consider myself so green, and I'm only just on the start line now. That's how I like to think of it. Sometimes I like to relate it back to when I was an athlete. Like I've done all the training for the last 4 years. That's what that's been, just a good base build. And right now, as I've got on to 7+ a bit more consistently, I'm on the start line. So now it's time to go. Like it's not the time to switch off. It's the time to really dig in. So it's if you go back and listen to some of my early ones, I think people will be like, this guy's funny as, but he's an idiot. And I think now they'd be like, oh yeah, he's still kind of funny, but he calls a lot cleaner. So it's a good balance.
And the day of calling a whole event of track and field, do you get nervous? Are you excited? Like, how do you feel through the day?
Oh mate, I'm buzzing. Nah, I'm nothing. I got a little nervous on Sunday for Gout's race because now I'm like, geez, a lot of people are watching this, and I know a lot of people are dialed in. But that quickly goes because I always say this, and it's a stupid saying, but it keeps me calm. I always say, mate, I talk for free every day. If someone's going to pay me to talk, that's a blessing. So what's the difference between me telling somebody in the cafe about how well Gout raced versus me saying it on a microphone? Like, that's how I try and break it down. And like, I've been in athletics a long time. I competed in it as a kid, as I said. I've never seen it in a more exciting place. So for me, like I feel like I get to be a slight voice for athletics, and I'm like, what a blessing that is. Like I don't really see that as pressure. I see it as just fortune. So no, I get pretty G'd up. I have to get like calmed down. I'm literally listening to like heavy techno before I get into the booth just to rev myself up. Like I'm at a rave at 2 a.m. Like I'm ready to go. So nah, I get pretty pumped. If the career progresses and if I get really fortunate enough to call a Com Games or an Olympics or something of that nature, yeah, I'll be absolutely like packing my dacks. But for the time being, I'm pretty settled, and I'm just excited to be in there.
And your zone, you reckon your best event that you call, or your most loved event that you call?
Ooh, well, I grew up a 1,500 meter runner, so I always have a soft spot for calling the distances, and I grew up with a lot of these guys, and I now obviously I'm starting to know this younger crop, so I really love calling the distance races, anywhere up to like 5K, 10K. Again, randomly, I like calling the race walk because my family has such a connection to it. I know not a lot of people watch it, but we are incredible at it in this country. And mate, the 100 is always fun. The 100 is always a fun thing to call. It really is, and I would love to tell you it's a 1,500 because I personally think it's a blue ribbon event of the track, but the 100 will, to me, always be a blue ribbon event. I've called a marathon before. I've done Melbourne Marathon the past 2 years. It's a long amount of time talking, but I'm sure, as you can tell, I have no shortage of words. So yep. I like calling that. Probably the 1,500, I would say, is my favourite event to call.
That's awesome. And in terms of practice, do you ever like turn the TV down and practice on things?
Only when I'm with my mates and they think it's great fun. Sometimes when I'm sitting at home, I've done the footy and I'll call the footy and I'll try and do that. And I'm really keen to expand my broadcasting career and do more. But I know it's a patience game. It takes time. So you just got to keep applying your trade. But yeah, sometimes my mates will be like, just turn it off. We'll get Mitchy to call it. And then, look, sometimes we've had a couple of beers, so it gets a bit haywire. But yeah, I do like practicing. You know what? I've gone back and I've called some races from previous Olympics, or events that I grew up being like, this is the best thing ever. David Rudisha, 2012, London 800 meters world record. I've recalled that a few times. I would never touch the Cathy race in 2000 because you'll never, ever get a better race call than how Bruce called it. Even in Paris, I was fortunate enough to be there last year, not in the broadcasting sense, but doing my own work. I'd go back and watch and think about how I would call it. And there's an Aussie called Lee Diffie who calls in the US for NBC. His call of the men's 1500 to me is brilliant. And even I go back and I'll listen to past commentators and be like, oh, God, I love the way they do that. And like the way Phil Liggett describes things at the Tour de France. Doris Burke in the US is one of my favorite storytellers. So, yeah, I'll give it a nudge at recalling it, but most of the time I'm just studying. I just love listening to how other people call. It's fun to me.
So studying the commentators, studying the call, and studying the athletes, and then you're right to go. You're prepared. You're confident.
Yeah, and then I feel ready. I think for me, I always doubted whether I was fully ready because I didn't know enough, and now I feel like I'm getting to a point where I can draw on either notes I've written down or things that I've watched in the past or anything of that nature. So, yeah, I feel my most confident when I'm prepared, which is like, duh, of course. But yeah, is it Tommy Hayshie? I can't remember who said this, but if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail.
Yep.
So
yep.
I'm trying to use that mantra in the booth at the moment.
And you talk about research. I mean, we're in this age of social media, which probably wasn't as prominent when you were growing up in terms of athletes and their presence and their personal brand and the snippets, etc. How prominent are you in terms of like doom scrolling around different events and looking at snippets and YouTube and all these things to get your research up, and how important is it now, I suppose, for an athlete to kind of be a bit more brand aware, particularly in some sports that may not have been as prominent back in the 10 years ago?
Oh yeah, mate, I'm a huge doom scroller. Love a doom scroll. I can get sucked down that portal for a good couple of hours, but I do like because I can then see the personal life of the athlete or how they've been training or something that I've missed, something that I haven't. As well for us, and I should give him a massive mention in athletics, there's a guy called David Tarbottom who supplies us a lot of stats as well, a lot of past figures and all that. So we draw on that a fair bit. But in terms of the social media stuff, absolutely. And I work in that field, and I'm try and produce as much content as I can for athletes and brands and all of that sort of stuff. But it's a key insight, I think, into their life. And nobody does it better than Tamsin Manu. She has the best. I tell you, sometimes she comes out with stuff. Be like, oh, yeah. I remember she was telling us a story. I think it was Tom Hunt, Orange Meter hurdler. She's like, oh, he was on a game show when he was like 8. And I remember just thinking, like, how the hell do you even find that information? She gets it off social. She gets it off everywhere. So it is important, and it's cool because then not just us as we're talking to the people, but anybody can go and see what these guys and girls are doing now behind the scenes. So yeah, I'll quickly shift from my like meme doom scrolling into actual work doom scrolling, and that's when I'm at my best.
I better look at 15 posts ago on this athlete to know that they're training in the US, so therefore you could throw that in,
Yeah, exactly. So, mate, it's a great question. It is actually getting more and more important.
Mitch, a couple of questions I asked the guests. Two things is sort of like a Kodak moment or a snapshot in a photo of your life or something, or a moment in your life, the scoreboard moment, which maybe has pivoted yourself, maybe has been impactful, something that's clear, a particular time or a particular place. Do you have a scoreboard moment?
Oh, that's a really great question. Yeah, I think my whole life and perspective changed a few years ago. And it was actually a conversation I had with a life mentor, and I was in my early 20s, and I distinctly remember I was sitting in his car in Box Hill, basically having a meltdown. And I was trying to convince him at 24, can you believe this, that I couldn't make decisions because I felt like I was limited. And I was, raging to him basically like, oh, my life is this, that, and that. And he basically stopped me and said, mate, you're 23, you've got no wife, no kids, no mortgage, no anything. Like, you're the most limitless bloke in the world. That was the first step for me where I thought, yeah, he's actually right. Like, I'm not 40 with all these, things that I can't change. I'm 23. I can do whatever I want. So if you are a young person listening to this, just remember you are limitless in what you do. But my biggest Kodak moment was definitely sitting in the Olympic Stadium last year. I could never have imagined in my wildest dreams when I was a tradie only 2 years before that I would be sitting in Paris working in athletics media. And to me, that was a real moment where, and I'm sure you can attest to this, when you're working towards something for so long, it's really hard to see what you've done, I think. And I hadn't taken a moment yet to appreciate maybe the journey I'd been on to get there. And I remember just sitting in the stadium thinking like, wow, this is, I didn't just will this into existence. I hate reading those self-help things sometimes when they're like, oh, if you just imagine it, it'll happen. I was like, yeah, I put it out in the universe, but I worked really hard to get here. And this is a dream come true. And that to me was like, all right, I'm on the right track. And that kind of kept me in good stead. So I would say that's been the biggest moment for me where I've gone, wow, this is pretty cool. I'm onto something here. And it's sort of kept my consistency going this year because you just never know where that next great opportunity is going to be. And I think that's allowed me to see that.
Mate, that's an incredible moment and well reflected too in terms of the retrospective reflection, because it is hard to do sometimes, and you are continuing on your journey of life, and then all of a sudden to actually just to pause and reflect a little bit. It's very healthy, but also at the same time, just to sort of go, right, that's a good moment. Let's move forward into the next phase. One more question I've got for you is on your favourite sporting moment of all time.
Wow, favourite sporting moment of all time. Jeez, what stands out to me the most? I'll tell you what, the day Carlton wins a premiership will become my favourite sporting moment of all time.
Yes, the way that they're going at the moment, but you never know. They had a good on the scoreboard this weekend. They're one down.
Yeah, one down. Probably a lot more disappointing weeks to come. My favourite sporting moment of all time. Look, as a kid, honestly, watching David Rudisha break the world record in the 800 to me was just surreal. For a guy to run 140 before super shoes and all that stuff, now I reflect on it, I'm like, wow, that is actually one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But my favourite sporting moment live, again, probably would have come at the Olympics, and purely because I'm a 1,500 metre guy, and I was blessed last year. I had a month period where I was in Paris. I watched Jess Hull run 350, fifth fastest time ever. 2 weeks later, I was in Monaco. I watched her break the world record for the 2K. And then 2 weeks later, I'm at the Olympics and I watched her get a silver medal. And I think for me as a middle distance kid growing up, and we had Buster Mottram, if you remember Craig Mottram, he was just the man when we were growing up. And I remember watching Buster thinking, wow, anything's possible. But he got that world champs medal, but just missed that Olympic medal. So to watch Jess come second at the Olympics, and she's my age and we've spent a fair bit of time together now, and she's just a beautiful person. I was actually quite emotional because I thought just what this is going to do for young women in sport, particularly, who are just dominating, by the way. Our women in athletics are just superb. To watch that live and know the momentum shift that will have in this country was just unbelievable. And to, lucky enough in the media, I got to see her straight after and embrace, and amongst all the other media, it was just really cool. So, yeah, Jess Hull's Olympic silver medal, probably equal with Nina's gold, is the coolest stuff I've seen live.
That's awesome. I've also got one more question, and it is about what makes a good 1,500 metre runner.
Ooh, great question. Okay, I think what makes a great 1,500 metre runner is just pure grit. You've got to be gritty. And I think you also have to be somebody who can leave races behind. What I mean by that is, like, in a 1,500 metre perspective, probably 1 in every 8 races is going to be a really good race, maybe even less, 1 in every 10. So if you get caught up a lot in the bad races, it's going to be hard for you to make that shift. And much in any distance race, there becomes a moment in every race where you have to make a decision, whether you're going to just put yourself out there and sacrifice your race and see what happens, or internalize and retreat. And then you always finish and you think, oh, geez, if I had just don't want to play that game. So to me, grit is the most important thing. And then really good staying power. You've got to have a good aerobic engine, because everybody can kick, right? Everybody's got a pretty good kick on them. But if you're able to hold a good pace for a longer period of time and maybe flush the legs out of those behind you, anything's possible. Hikam El Garouche, who you mentioned Bruce's call on that in the Olympics, like, he's one of the great examples of that. His staying power was just surreal. And his ability to get rid of the field and then kick was superb. So, yeah, I would say grit and staying power. They're the two best things.
The keys to success. Yeah, no, I watched that that 1500 metre call. Like, you watched it 1,000 times. That last 50 metres, right, where he's in second going, and Bruce is sort of going, he's been overtaken. And then he's like, and then that kick kicks in. Mitch, it's been an absolute pleasure having a chat to you today. Congratulations on what you've achieved thus far in your broadcasting career. And it feels like it's only just the beginning with all these amazing events coming up. And of course, we've got Brisbane 2032 and LA 28 in between at the biggest stage. I look forward to following your progress and helping athletics uplift in Australia, which is what you're doing, and having their renaissance moment. Let's hope it continues. And looking forward to following your progress.
Chris, thanks so much for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it. And thanks for a great interview. I'm pumped to see what athletics can do, and hopefully I get to keep being a small part of it. So it's been brilliant. Thank you.